welcome to Sonar TV. Our guest today is Dr. Scott Roos, Associate Dean of Students at the San Francisco campus of Hult International Business School. Scott is an experienced educator with over 20 years of experience and a one-time owner and operator of a tutoring and travel company in the Los Angeles area. Scott holds a Doctor of Education from the University of San Francisco, where he specialized on educational leadership and mindfulness and nutrition in education. His previous education includes a Bachelor's of Classical Dramatic Studies at Stanford and a Master's in Classics at the San Francisco State University. Scott is also a certified yoga teacher, and at the 500-hour level, he also speaks Sanskrit, Latin, and ancient Greek. Hello, Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning, man. How you been?
I'm well, thank you. This is the first time I've heard my resume like that, and so it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool. Like a lot of, ancient languages that people don't really know nowadays.
So, Scott, tell us more about yourself. What are your passions and centers of interest?
So, one of the things I'm passionate about is breathing. And we all breathe, but one of the best technologies to come out of the yoga tradition is slow breathing. And slow breathing is called pranayama in the yoga tradition. And pranayama is perhaps one of the most powerful tools because of its ability to reduce stress, anxiety, depression, and increase mindfulness in people. The yoga tradition, as it comes to America today and many other countries, is focused on the gymnastics of yoga, which is good. I do the gymnastics of yoga too. I love the asana classes. But really what's the most potent element is slow breathing because of its impact on the human autonomic nervous system. So I used a big word there. The human autonomic nervous system is the unconscious nervous system. It's the one that works all by itself. And there are two parts to it. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is fight, freeze, or flight. Fight or flight is what it's usually called. And the parasympathetic nervous system is rest and digest. And what happens to most people who have 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 jobs is you get stressed at work, and the stress that happens doesn't get dissipated like it normally would in nature. In nature, if a bear attacks you, you get stressed, you run really fast, and you burn off all that stress. But if you're sitting at your desk and your boss is yelling at you, you don't get to run away. In fact, you don't even get to move because you're sitting for too much. And so you hang out. Your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system, ends up overworking. And this impacts not just people in the workplace, but students as well. We find that students all the way from elementary school to middle school to high school to even college students experience quite a bit of stress, and anxiety and depression are on the rise amongst students as well. And so for me, doing research that involves showing people, hey, look at this tool from the yoga tradition that very few people are looking at. It works really well. It reduces stress. It reduces anxiety, reduces depression. It reduces test anxiety, which a lot of students experience as well. So long and short of it, I'm a big fan of breathing.
Do you think that the awareness of this is comparatively low? Like not where it should be in a lot of
no one knows about pranayama because so few people practice it. I was actually in a yoga class the other day, and the yoga teacher does what yoga teachers do. They say, "What do you guys want to work on today?" And of course, everyone in the class is like, "My hips, my hamstrings," right? And I shout out, "Pranayam!" And the teacher's taken aback, and she's like, "Okay, which kind of pranayam?" And so I say, Pratiloma Ujjayi, right? And just being silly, knowing full well that the teacher would have no clue what that was. But anyone who's actually trained in the pranayama tradition of yoga would say, oh, I know that one. That's a really good one. But she wasn't, of course. She said, is it okay if we just do regular Ujjayi breathing, which is just a type of breathing where you slow the breath down using a sound in the back of your throat. It's a glottal contraction in the back of the throat that makes a sound. It's supposedly heating to the body, but what it really does is it allows you to valve the breath better. And if you valve the breath, you can slow the breath down better. And in the yoga tradition, the slower the breath, the slower the mind. And yogis who actually practice pranayama can actually slow their breath down to one breath every 40 seconds, one breath every minute for 15 minutes or 20 minutes at a time. And they actually slow their mind down and create enormous relaxation in the body. Traditionally, in the yoga tradition at least, pranayama was always done before meditation because you'd slow the system down. You get into a state of super deep relaxation, and then you would meditate. So that's the history of a little pranayama there.
How would you practice this? Like if you're a beginner, so to say, either the simple breathing or the more complicated, is there like any way of learning it or practicing it?
It's very simple to practice. Everyone can go ahead and make the sound. And you do that by opening your mouth and going, You make that sound. It's like trying to fog a mirror. Have you ever tried to hold a mirror up and try to make fog on it? It's that sound you would make. So you do that sound, but close your mouth as you make that sound. And so you're breathing in and out through your nose. And that's it. I use a metronome. You can get a metronome app on your phone. There's a good one called Tempo that's only $3. You set it to one beat every 60. You set it to 60, which means one beat a second. And you can count your breath. And a good starting place is inhale 4, exhale 4. And if you can do inhale 4, exhale 4 for about 8 minutes, and I always tell people 4 times a day is what the yoga tradition says. So if you can breathe 4 times a day for 5 minutes, it will radically transform your life. And I did my research, my dissertation research, teaching heads of high schools and heads of grammar schools how to do this breathing. And the ones who were extremely stressed, experienced a radical transformation in their life. They were able to process emotions that they hadn't been able to process. They were less angry. Their other stress coping techniques worked better. They were able to stay on task better. Because one of the things that people who are very busy have is they have so many tasks to do that they can't be in the present moment with the task that they're on because they're still processing the task before, or they're still thinking about the task that's to come. And so they don't do any of their tasks very well because they can't be focused in the present. And one of the things we found is that pranayama, people who practice pranayama regularly, they're able to stay focused on the present task better.
But how do you find the time for all this? Because as you know, like we've all have like really busy days and everything.
Yes.
So is there like a specific time where you'd have to do it, or like a specific location, let's say someplace quiet, or can you just do it on your commute to work, for example?
So ideally you want to be somewhere quiet, but practically speaking, that's not possible. And so whenever you can get it in is a great time to do it. I usually tell people the 4 befores is the best time to practice. Before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, and before bed. Because usually when you're getting ready for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or bed, you have a little bit of downtime there, and you can squeeze it in 5 minutes, or if even up to 8 minutes of breathing in the 4 befores. That would be 32 minutes a day. Radical transformation in how you experience your life. You can do it on your commute. I often do a little breathing on my commute to and from work. If it's a 14-minute train ride, well, that's 14 minutes of breathing each way. I mean, that's amazing. And it really allows me personally to decompress from a very busy day.
What about before studying for a test? Like that would help for concentration, right?
Absolutely. It will help for concentration before studying for a test. So.
Do you know the function of the Apple Watch where you also train to do your breathing right? And what
I'm not familiar with that function on the Apple Watch.
Okay, because like I saw that with Colin yesterday. He has like this application on his Apple Watch that tells him to breathe like for 1 minute. He told me I think every hour 1 minute of deep breathing, inhaling and holding the breath to keep his stress level lower.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's a good idea, and I would change it slightly. The research shows that you start to get effects of deep breathing after 2 minutes of deep, slow breathing. And what they were doing is looking at the constriction of your arteries and veins and blood pressure and things. And the science I don't really understand very well, but I remember from the research that 2 minutes of slow breathing is you start to get an effect. I don't know if 1 minute is enough, and maybe it is, and maybe someone out there can go do the research.
About the breathing, do you breathe with the lungs or with the stomach?
That's a great question, too. In traditional yoga practice, if you're doing the asanas, if you're doing the poses, the idea is that when you inhale, you expand the top of the chest first, then you expand the middle part of the chest and the side ribs, and lastly, you release the belly. And you breathe that way, and then exhale, you exhale from the perineal floor up to the pubic bone area. You contract the muscles there. You contract all the way up sequentially up to the belly button and then up to the solar plexus, or the xiphoid process here. And the reason for that is to facilitate the movements that you're doing in the asana practice. So oftentimes on inhale, you're lifting the arms. And if you're lifting the arms, it helps to lift the arms if you're also expanding the chest. So the expansion of the chest helps you to lift the arms. And oftentimes when you're exhaling, you're doing some sort of bendy motion forward. And so that exhale from the bottom up, where you're contracting the perineal floor and the pubic bone area, helps facilitate the pelvic, what we call the pelvic lumbar rhythm. It's how the waist interacts with the back, and so it helps you to fold forward and stretch the low back in whatever you're doing. So if you're doing a forward bend or a twist, you're usually exhaling, and so you want to contract the bottom area to help you with the motion that you're doing. If you're just sitting and meditating, if you're just in a sitting posture, where you breathe doesn't matter as much. So you could breathe from the middle and relax, and you could inhale the top and inhale the belly at the same time. You can inhale into the belly completely. That technique is especially good for grounding if you feel ungrounded or lightheaded. Inhaling and expanding the belly is the technique that's recommended.
How would you do that? Because it sounds pretty complicated to inflate the belly, right? Do you have any kind of technique or whatever?
Yeah, so you're not actually inflating the belly, since the lungs don't actually go into the belly. It's the just the action of relaxing the belly as you inhale, and it creates space for the diaphragm to move down. So it's an awareness exercise, and it comes with practice. It's like anything. If you're not used to doing it, you just practice doing it consciously until it becomes a pattern, and then you can practice that way.
Maybe putting the hand on the belly and
that's
trying
a
to
great idea.
Blow it up, kind of like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Put your hand on your belly and really focus on relaxing the belly as you inhale, and then focus on pulling the belly in as you exhale. So you have a little bit of belly motion as you sit and breathe.
I know a lot of students and people generally nowadays have a lot of problems with mobility, especially the pain in the back and lower back. Do you have any a 5 to 10 minute yoga routine or something that people could practice every morning to stretch out?
Yes, I mean the tradition of yoga that I'm trained in is called Vinyasa, and not many people know about it because it's not popular amongst young people. Young people like the gymnastics, hardcore gym yoga, where you're getting all bendy and you're standing on one hand and your legs are in the air, and you get all the muscles in the six-pack. And Vinyasa can do that, but Vinyasa means adaptation. And so Vinyasa looks at your body and what's going on, what you need to accomplish for your body, whether you need to build strength or remove some pain. And then we design a yoga practice, a physical yoga practice, an asana practice, to help you regain mobility and reduce the pain that you're experiencing. There are little 10-minute practices that we can show you that are general healthy back practices, absolutely. And the idea is, in the Vinyasa tradition, is that you want to retrain your neural networks in your brain so that your muscles are working together in a right way, because usually the pain happens because you're moving your body incorrectly. And that happens when you sit staring at a computer screen for 4 hours and you lose all body awareness and your body slumps into some awkward position, but you're actually teaching your body the wrong position in that slumping pose, whether it be hunching over at the computer, and you're teaching your body to have a bend in your upper back that we would call a thoracic kyphosis. You're exacerbating that, which might cause neck pain or back pain. And so what we do is we'll teach your body to unprogram those bad habits by a process that we call proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. This is a fancy word, PNF, it's for short. The acronym is PNF theory. And so when you do the yoga poses, you don't hold them. They're not static poses. You inhale into and out of the poses so that you're training your muscles through emotion. And in that training with the breath, you're actually reprogramming your mind so that when your mind operates your body is going to be in a better position, if that makes sense.
I want to move the conversation a little bit. Part of your job is hiring new professors for Hult.
Yes, that is part of my job. There's a very new, yes, go ahead.
And you have just returned from an interview yourself. That's a pretty important job. You're kind of gatekeeping the castle walls, I guess, of Hult against would-be intruders, and because the people come here would shape the minds of young people, and these
absolutely
people will have an effect to the future and the when they graduate. So what do you look for people, for professors when they apply?
So I want higher degrees, because one of the things that Hult is dealing with right now is we have we're triple accredited business school. Mm-hmm. We're the only triple accredited business school in the United States, which I think, yeah, I know, there's my plug for Hult in the United States, which is fantastic. We're doing things really well here. And one of our accreditors really likes to have people with doctorates. So I want people to have their higher degrees. I like people who have actual real-world business experience, too. So if I can get someone who has a higher degree and someone who has real-world business experience, like they're golden, then the third thing we want is someone who publishes, because we need people who do some research as well. So that's the golden three. My secret ingredient that I'm looking for in people, you ready for this? I want to see that they're making the world a better place. I want to see that they're doing some service, that they're involved in some sort of charity, that they're helping out people. The fellow I just interviewed is helping out a village in Nicaragua. Like, he just helped revamp their school building and got them flushing toilets and got them a kitchen. He raised $130,000 to build a well so that they can have water, as their village has trouble with water. So I'm like, this guy's golden. I want this guy to work for us, because I want people who are actively participating in making the world a better place working at Hult, because that's what I want the students to learn from these teachers. Because I can graduate students from business school who know how to do business. They make a lot of money, put it in their pockets, and go live in their mansions. But I don't want that. I want them to make a lot of money and to use their money for the good of humanity. That's the students I want to graduate. So I need professors who are doing the same thing.
How are you making the world a better place?
One, I think the field of education is one of those professions. You don't do it for the money, because you don't make a lot of money as an educator. So shaping minds and working with young people is making the world a better place. But I also started a charity called Farming New Orleans. And New Orleans was having problems before Hurricane Katrina, but after Hurricane Katrina, a lot of the neighborhoods weren't rebuilt very quickly. And because of that, there are no supermarkets or grocery stores in these neighborhoods. So you have poor people living in neighborhoods with no grocery stores and no cars and very bad public transportation. So you have poor people living in neighborhoods with not very good access to food, and we call these neighborhoods food deserts. So America has these food deserts. New Orleans is one of the cities with food deserts. And so what my charity does is we're buying up or getting donated or renting properties of land, just vacant land, and we're planting fruit trees on the vacant land in these food desert neighborhoods, so that people in the neighborhoods who have no access to fruit can now have access to fruit with just by walking down the street, rather than hopping on a bus for an hour each way trying to get to a supermarket, or going to a corner store that only has cans and boxes.
Have you always been so concerned and engaged in your personal health and well-being as well as other people's well-being, or was there a turning point at some point in your life?
That's a good question. I think the turning point, when did that turning point happen? I think there was a big turning point when I was around 28 years old. And I'd started doing yoga before that. And so I started becoming aware of health. But when I was 28, I turned vegetarian. So I became aware of the impact of what I eat on my body and what I eat on the environment, because contributing to the meat industry is actually contributing to the destruction of the environment in a way. So I don't mean to offend any meat eaters in the room. But that was a choice I made then. I said, okay, I'm not going to contribute to this industry anymore, and I want to watch what I eat and keep healthy. And also that was around the time that I started to meet Indian gurus and learn about the Indian traditions. So that was a big turning point. I sold my business at that point, and moved off to Albuquerque to study Indian medicine so that I could practice medicine. I ended up practicing medicine under my teacher in India for a few months, and we would just go to the villages and hand out free medicine that we bought. We, the students, paid for the medicine that we would give to the people in the villages because they had no access to medicine whatsoever. So I think that experience of wanting to help people was very transformative for me.
Can you walk us through the process that you decided to, sell your business and then kind of switch paths into because that's a pretty dramatic change,
I don't know if I want to share this process.
Okay.
I will, but it shows you how sometimes I'll make what looks like radical decisions based on what we would call omens and not on rational decision making. Mm-hmm. But I went. This was the age before Google, by the way, and I'd gone through a yoga teacher training, and I had discovered Ayurvedic medicine, which is the medicine from India, and I had lost 20 pounds for the first time just by changing my diet a little bit and taking some herbs. And so one of my friends said, hey, I know this Vedic astrologer who's also he's an Indian astrologer. Go see him. And I'm like, okay, I'll go see this guy. I don't know if I put any stock in this astrology thing. And so I went and sat down and in front of this guy, and he had my birth time, and he drew up a chart from that. And his first thing out of his mouth is he said, it looks like your backup career is always teaching, and you don't like to work for other people, so you're probably self-employed. What do? Well, at the time, I was running my tutoring business, right? I was a self-employed teacher, mm-hmm. and that's what I told him. I said, I'm a self-employed teacher. And how did he get that? Well, there was no Google, and there's no LinkedIn. You couldn't look me up, right? So I was really impressed, and he had my attention. And one of the things he said is, he said, look, you really need to know what he said was, you're a guru. Your problem is you're too young to be one. Go off and study the ancient Indian traditions so that when you get old, you can be a good guru. Mm. I'm like, okay. So it was that moment that I said, okay. And I was done with my business at the time because it wasn't meaningful for me. I was just collecting money from rich Los Angeles kids to help them with their homework. And they weren't interested in learning. They just were interested in getting their homework done. And so for me, it was time to move on. And so it all just kind of coalesced at that moment. And then I went off to meet Dr. Lad in Albuquerque, and I realized not only was he an amazing healer and Ayurvedic physician, but he was also a yogi in the old definition of the word yogi. He was a spiritual practitioner, and these yogis are spiritual scientists. And so I wanted to go study with someone who had gone to these higher states of meditation and had manifestations of hyper awareness and ability to almost perform miracles in what they could do to help people.
That's really cool. What does guru mean to you? Because the word nowadays has been sliced, diced, and repackaged so many times.
Right. So guru, on one level, just means teacher. On another level, it means someone who embodies a tradition and imparts that tradition onto the next generation. So maybe that's me. We'll see. We'll see if I can.
There's a lot of similarities in that with, I guess, like the traditional missionary, no? Where you would embody the word of God and go about and preach that.
Maybe. I don't know. Missionary for me is kind of a bad word. And maybe that's not fair because missionaries will go off and impose their belief system onto a population that doesn't necessarily need that. Mm-hmm. And I understand that a lot of missionaries are quite good people, and they go to countries to actually help poor people in foreign countries, and they're not actually seeking to convert. But I do see your point in teaching, making pranayama available. I'm kind of being a missionary for pranayama and breathing, right? I'm teaching people something that they didn't know before, because it's good for them. So, yes, I see what you're saying.
You mentioned you were vegetarian.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people who eat meat, a lot of people who don't, but there's also a lot of people in between. They're not sure. They want to try. They don't really know how. They don't really know how expensive it's going to be, that kind of stuff. So, like, how do you deal with the expenses? It probably takes you more time to make food. You had to change a lot of stuff to become vegetarian, right?
Well, you just have to make sure you... interesting. Because where I'm living now, I don't really utilize the kitchen. And that's because one of my housemates who owns the property is hyper clean. So clean that I feel bad about messing up the kitchen. So I have access to a cafeteria at Levi's, and I know the chef. I've talked to the chef, and the chef's all about sustainable food and all about getting organic whenever he can, and they're all about vegetarian options. So for me, it's quite easy. I have a vegetarian breakfast over at Levi's, and then I can get a big vegetarian lunch at Levi's. And oftentimes I won't even eat dinner because in the yoga tradition, you're only supposed to eat 2 meals a day, not 3. But if I get hungry in the evening, I'll have a little snack, like some cashews or something. And if I have to go out with some friends for dinner date, then maybe I'll eat dinner and I'll just consciously eat less for breakfast and lunch. So for me, it's quite easy to be vegetarian. But my advice to people who want to become vegetarian is don't panic and do it slowly. Try it out slowly, because big change quickly is not necessarily sustainable. But if you make a smaller change, maybe you say, okay, I'm not going to eat beef, and you cut the beef out. And then maybe you say, okay, I'm going to cut out next the pork and maybe the chicken. And then you're still eating fish. And then maybe you cut out, and maybe you stop there. You become a pescatarian, and that's decent enough for what you need and what you want. Or maybe you want to go one step further, and then you cut out, the shrimp and the crawfish and the oysters and the clams, and keep some fish. Or maybe but do it gradually is my point. Because a big change quickly won't be sustainable.
What about the energy impact? Like, a lot of people work out, and especially like us, like between 18 and 25, so to say, we have to spend a lot of energy continually. How would that impact it, the fact of going vegetarian?
Well, for me, I noticed I had more energy after being vegetarian. But then again, I wasn't eating very well. I had a lot of fast food in my diet. As long as you're getting enough calories, I think you'll feel better about it. If you're a big weightlifter and you need muscle mass, you might have to do some sort of supplements. But in general, my friends who are vegetarian and avid exercisers, I have a friend who's vegetarian and avid runner, and no problem. Well, I shouldn't say no problem. You have to watch iron if you're a runner. and being vegetarian and your iron can be a little tricky. But other than that, for most people I know who've been vegetarian and are avid exercisers don't have much of a problem. You might just have to eat more.
If you could change roles with one fictional character, who would it be?
It would be Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Why?
It just sounds so cool to have a starship and go around and explore, new planets and meet alien races. So yes, I think that would be my choice, is to wander around the universe and meet all the aliens and.
I mean, in a way, I think that kind of encapsulates the guru, right? You kind of go on to the unknown,
Yeah.
see some stuff, come back, be like, this is how it is.
It is kind of like that. I did go out and meet people and go to places that most people don't go to.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we had one with animals too. As a matter of fact, what animal would you be?
What animal would I be?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Deep question.
That's a deep question. And I'm trying to so maybe a porpoise or a dolphin.
I don't even know what the purpose is.
What is the purpose?
It's a dolphin. Do you know what a dolphin is? Yeah. It's they swim everywhere.
I'll
And
put the picture on the purpose on the screen.
A porpoise is like a salt water. No, it's a river.
I don't know if they swim in rivers or oceans. I don't know much about them, but they swim the whole ocean and they seem to be having fun, and humans go swim with them sometimes, and they swim with the humans and save humans sometimes, but they look like they're having a great old time in the ocean.
Freedom and fun, that's why.
Freedom and fun, yes.
Right, and I think one final question. If you had $1 billion, if you had $1 billion right now landing on your lap, basically.
No questions, tax-free.
Tax-free even. What would I do with it? Oh, wow. Well, I'd probably put a little bit away for myself and my family, and then the rest of it I would establish some sort of charitable trust and figure out how to help people with the rest of that money.
Do you have any idea what kind of cause it would be towards, or a specific problem?
Well, definitely I would look to food deserts, and farming New Orleans would get a big boost, and I would look to developing nations as well. One of my favorite charities is the Heifer Project, and they hook people up with livestock and animals, right? So if you buy a cow for a family that's struggling in Central America, suddenly they're able to have milk for their family. Like, it radically transforms people that way. So I would get involved on that kind of end, really helping people in developing nations with water, with livestock, with farming, and I would go that route.
That's cool.
And I plant a lot of trees. I think we need more trees.
I agree. All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, guys. This was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.